Okay, here's how we're going to start the recipe to make beans. And by the way, this is for any kind of beans. I don't care if they're white beans, red beans, kidney beans, doesn't matter. Recipe's still the same. But for this recipe, we're going to use pink beans, which is a much better tasting bean in my opinion than regular pinto beans. To make beans, which we call in Spanish frijoles de la olla, which means beans of the pot. And this is a healthy way for you to make beans, and it's very cost effective. You're going to have your bag of beans. This bag of beans is exactly 1 pound. And what you're going to have is 3 cloves of garlic. Now we like garlic in ours. If you want to leave it out, you certainly can. And if you want to add more, that's up to you. And then right next to that is 1 jalapeno. And actually that's a kind of a big jalapeno. Usually our jalapenos are not that big, but anyways. And right next to that we have some salt and half of an onion. With the onion, it can be a brown onion, a yellow onion, but it cannot be a red one because that'll definitely be a different flavor profile. So let me show you now. Here's a video of me looking for rocks on this one, but the only thing I found was 1 bad bean. So we threw that out, and that was the only bad one that I found. And now we're going to move on to rinsing them. And then that way you get the dirt off of them. And especially people, if you're buying beans that are in a bin, they're going to have a lot of dirt in them. So again, make sure you rinse them off with running tap water. Then what we're going to do is we're going to prepare them to soak overnight. And this is important. When you have your beans soaking overnight, you want them soaking in drinking water. Water that you're going to drink, because these beans are going to soak up a lot of it. And what you want to do is make sure you have over 1.5 inches to 2 inches at least of water in there so that overnight it won't dry up on you. The next day you're going to pour off that excess water and drain them again, because this is another way we're cleaning, because whatever it didn't soak up, whatever's left in the remaining water could still have remnants of things. So that's why you're going to pour out whatever's left there. Now you're going to put them into the crock pot, and I'm using a crock pot, but you can also put this into a regular pot on the stove, which I'll tell you how to do in a moment. But here's what you want to put, whether you're using a crock pot or whether you're using it on the stove top. You want to put in your cloves of garlic, and obviously you want to peel them before you put them in. And I will admit that I did squish them quite a bit, and the reason is because my family, we like garlic, so we don't mind eating it after it is cooked. We're not going to pull them out. But if you're the one that's going to want to pull the garlic out, just peel them and leave them whole, and you'll easily be able to pull those out after the beans are done. So moving on to preparing the onion. You can see the butt of the onion here has that knob on it. We're going to cut that hairy knob off, but we're not going to cut it off so much so that the onion comes apart, because remember, we're going to put this in to flavor the broth, but we're not going to eat it when the beans are done. We want to pull it out whole. So here's a picture of after I've cut it off, and you see that the other area still is holding that half of an onion together. And of course you peel the onion. So here's my soaked beans. Here's the jalapeno. Here's the 3 cloves of garlic and the half of an onion. And yes, I do see that I left that skin in there, but now you'll see as soon as I do the next step, which is we're going to pour water over this, and that little skin of that garlic floated to the top, and I was able to take it out. And what I want you to do is cover your beans with at least 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water. And if you're going to leave these beans unattended, then it's better to err on the heavier side to 1.5 inches of water. If you are going to be home, then it's easy to check on the beans and to make sure they're not drying out as they're cooking. But here you can see how much water I added to these beans. And obviously with a slow cooker, a crock pot, I'm going to go ahead and cook these on low, and I'm going to put them on for 8 hours. If you want to cook them faster, then you can cook them on high for 4 hours. Either way works, but here's the difference. When you cook them for 4 hours, you might get the beans bursting like this, unless you're there to watch them to take them out right before they start bursting. So they still taste good, they still taste the same, but if you are a stickler for how they look, then maybe you want to do them low and slow instead. If you're going to cook these on the stove top, most recipes on the bag itself will tell you to put it onto the stove, bring it up to a boil, and once it comes up to a boil, you lower it down to a simmer with the lid slightly ajar. And the reason for that is because you'll let the air escape and they won't foam over and spill onto your stovetop. And you're going to cook them for anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. One more tidbit. True Mexicans put a herb called epazote inside of the beans, but that's not an easy herb for people to find. And I'll admit, I've done it with the epazote. I don't find a big difference in flavor. I find a better difference in flavor by buying these pink beans, which, by the way, unfortunately are not as easy to find everywhere, but I'm lucky in my community. I have one Mexican store I can find these at. I find that using the pink beans is what really gives it a better quality of flavor. I just think it's a better tasting bean. And by the way, too, here's another tidbit. You can put in a tablespoon of oregano, dried Mexican oregano, and crush that in, and that can also serve as a little bit of a base flavor if you're not lucky enough to have the pink beans on hand. But again, either way works, and here's how you tell if your beans are done. Whether you cook them slow for 8 hours on low or fast for 4 hours on high, you pull a bean out and you just squash it like this. And if it gives away easily, you'll know that they're done. The jalapeno, I take it out, I take off the stem, get rid of that for sure, but then I cut up the jalapenos and dice them up and put them back into the pot. If you're not into spice, or you're not sure if you are, you can cut the jalapeno open and remove the seeds and remove the vein and set that aside, and just chop up the jalapeno itself for sure. Don't throw that away because that is great flavor. Even if you don't like spice, there won't be much spice at all coming from just the green part of the jalapeno. So yes, dice that up lengthwise and then cut it up in smaller pieces, put that back into the pot. And then this way you can decide later, if you taste it, whether you want to add more spice to it, and do it in parts, because if you add the whole amount of seeds and the vein in it, it's going to go from flavor to spicy pretty quick. The other thing, we do not add the salt until the beans are done. There's a lot of theories out there about it making the beans tough or something. I don't know, but I just keep doing it the traditional way. Listen to what my mother said. Add the salt at the end. And how much salt? This is critical. 1 tablespoon exactly is what you start with. After that, you will only add salt to taste in 1/4 teaspoon at a time, because it's really easy, guys, to go overboard on the salt, and it's hard to take it back the other direction. So I do 1 tablespoon for sure, and then taste it after stirring it around. And when I say taste it, I mean you taste the broth. You don't need to eat the bean. You just taste the broth, and that should let you know if you have enough flavor. If you're not sure, add another 1/4 teaspoon, taste it again. I don't think I've ever had to add more than 1 tablespoon plus 1/2 teaspoon. I don't think I've ever gone over that much, okay? Now, that means the beans are all done and they're ready to eat. Now, you can put into this soup whatever you want. Now, the way we do it is for sure using just diced up white onion, because white onion is much milder than other forms of onion. We dice up the onion and we dice up cilantro and we sprinkle that on top, and then you can even throw some cheese on top. You can use cotija cheese, which is very salty, sprinkle that on top, or you can use queso fresco, which is not as salty, more creamy. You can throw that on top, or you can use regular cheddar cheese or whatever cheese you have in the house and throw it in there. But one of my favorite things to do is we like putting chunks of steak into the bowl. And that is great for leftovers. So if you have leftover steak, leftover hamburger, you can throw that in for more protein. But either way, what's nice about this recipe is that it's very healthy, it's very economical. Just separate out into the freezer what you're not going to eat within a week, because I guarantee you beans like this that are fresh are not going to last you weeks on end in the refrigerator. They will go bad pretty quickly. So anyways, I hope you enjoy.